It is just after sunrise in Pompeii, sometime in the 1st century AD, and the city is waking up. Shop shutters are coming open onto the street. Bakers are getting their ovens ready. Craftsmen are setting out tools. People are already moving between homes, workshops, and public fountains before the streets fill properly. If you lived here, this was the beginning of your day. The famous parts of Rome rarely mattered to a morning like this. Unless a spectacle was scheduled, the arena had nothing to do with your routine. Emperors and distant wars mattered far less than the work waiting outside your door. Most days were ordinary. You had work to do, people to deal with, food to find, errands to run, and somewhere to be before the light disappeared. So what did an ordinary Roman actually do all day? That sounds simple until you look at who left us the evidence. The Romans who wrote books were usually educated and wealthy. They tell us plenty about politics, law, war, and elite social life. A baker, porter, or shopkeeper had much less reason to write down what happened during a normal working day. Pompeii helps us get around that problem. When Vesuvius buried the city in AD 79, it preserved streets, shops, workshops, food counters, houses, graffiti, and business records together in one place. Pompeii was only one Roman city, so it cannot represent everyone across the empire. But few places preserve ordinary urban life in this much detail. The day itself began with the sun. Romans divided daylight into 12 hours, but these were not fixed 60-minute blocks. Summer gave them more daylight, so each daytime hour lasted longer. Winter shortened them. That meant the third hour of the day fell at a different modern clock time depending on the season. Their schedule followed sunrise and sunset much more closely than ours does. Knowing the hour still tells us very little about what someone was actually doing. There was no standard Roman routine. A wealthy patron, a shopkeeper, an enslaved household worker, and a laborer could wake in the same city and spend the morning in completely different ways. For men involved in elite politics and patronage, the morning often included the salutatio. Clients arrived at the house of a powerful patron to greet him, ask for help, and maintain the relationship. The patron benefited from the arrangement too. When he later entered public life surrounded by followers, everyone could see how much influence he had. A few streets away, the morning looked nothing like that. A shopkeeper was opening for customers. A baker was dealing with grain, dough, and a hot oven. A fuller was cleaning and processing clothes. Porters were moving goods through the city. Inside wealthy homes, enslaved workers were cooking, cleaning, carrying water, and running errands, long before the household's leisure began. Women also worked throughout the city, both inside households and in shops, workshops, and family businesses. For a large part of the population, morning simply meant getting on with the job, and much of that work happened right beside the street. Roman shops often opened directly onto the road. A customer standing at a counter was only a few steps from passing carts, neighbors, political notices, and people carrying goods across town. The street was where business happened, where people met, and where news traveled. Food was part of that street life too. Pompeii had dozens of small food and drink shops known as thermopolia. Picture a counter facing the road with large containers built into it. Someone walking past could stop, buy prepared food, and continue with the day. That was especially useful in modest homes with very limited cooking space. If you lived behind a shop or in a cramped rented room, buying something ready to eat was often the practical choice. It gives us a very different picture from the Roman banquet everyone knows from films. Those long dinners belonged to people with the money, space, and servants to hold them. An ordinary working day was much simpler. Earlier meals were light, while the main meal, the cena, came later. In the middle of a working day, food had to fit around the job. The merchant still had customers after midday. Workshops still had orders to finish. Goods still needed moving, and households still depended on people working inside them. Afternoon leisure depended heavily on whether you had the freedom to stop. For people who did, the baths became one of the most familiar parts of the Roman day. By the late Republic and into the Empire, afternoon bathing was well established in urban life. A visit involved much more than washing. People exercised, moved through rooms kept at different temperatures, talked with friends, and spent time around other people from the city. You heard news there. You ran into acquaintances. Business conversations followed people through the doors. So the baths matter here because of where they sat in the day. For many people with enough control over their schedule, work dominated the morning and social time opened up later. Pompeii also preserves something far more personal than a bathhouse or a shop. Its walls are covered with writing. Some messages were painted carefully. Others were scratched straight into the plaster. People left names, jokes, insults, love messages, political endorsements, reminders, and drawings. One person wrote something, and another person sometimes answered underneath it. Imagine walking the same streets every day while all of that accumulated around you. A campaign message beside a doorway, someone advertising a business, a love note, an insult aimed at somebody who probably knew exactly who wrote it. These were not carefully composed histories. They were part of ordinary city life, and they make Pompeii feel crowded with actual personalities rather than anonymous figures wearing togas. We get another glimpse through a man named Lucius Caecilius Jucundus. Jucundus was a Pompeian businessman involved in auctions and financial transactions. Archaeologists recovered 153 wax tablets from his house. Most concern business. They record payments, auctions, and dealings involving the city. Read them as a group and a working economy starts to appear. People were buying property, settling accounts, recording payments, and keeping track of transactions. Jucundus was not describing his day for us. He was simply running a business. That is exactly why the tablets are so useful. The paperwork connects the shops and streets we can still see to the money moving through them. There is another source that takes us even closer to the rhythm of a normal day. Romans used language-learning texts known as the colloquia to teach Greek and Latin. The lessons used situations students were expected to recognize from everyday life. They include going to school, handling money, eating lunch, visiting the baths, having dinner, arguing with people, and eventually going to bed. The authors were teaching vocabulary. In the process, they preserved a sequence of ordinary activities because those activities were familiar enough to make useful lessons. By evening, attention shifted toward the cena, the main meal. For wealthy households, dinner could become a social event. Guests reclined, servants brought food and wine, and the host entertained people he wanted around him. Most households operated on a much smaller scale. Someone living above a shop ate in a very different setting from the owner of a large house, even though both were part of the same Roman city. Now think back to the streets at sunrise. By the end of the day, most Romans had spent very little time anywhere near the parts of Rome that dominate history books. Their world was much closer. It was the workshop where they earned money, the counter where they bought food, the customers they dealt with, and the people they passed every day. Political notices and jokes appeared on the walls around them. Businessmen kept accounts. Workers finished jobs. Families ate together. People with enough free time spent part of the afternoon at the baths. Then the streets gradually quieted and people went home. That is easy to miss when ancient Rome is reduced to emperors, legions, and arenas. Those things were real, but ordinary people did not spend every hour surrounded by them. Most of life happened in shops, workshops, homes, and busy streets, with people trying to earn money, get food, manage relationships, and make it through another working day. Pompeii preserved enough of that world for us to see past the marble. And once you do, an ordinary Roman day feels far more familiar than the monuments make it seem.